I really enjoyed this book. I thought it had some really good moments. However, I was a little bit disappointed with this book. So come and join me in this video and find out exactly what I thought about these two novels that I read on my holiday. Welcome back to Bookish Brummy. My name's Mel and I like to review books. So for today's video we're going to catch up on the last two books that I read in Miscellaneous March that I've not yet done a review for, as I'd read so many books when I went on holiday, 7 in total, between the last review and then the new review, that I just couldn't possibly review them all in one video. So I'm going to start today's review off with the last book that I actually read in March, which was Women's Hotel by Daniel Lavery. Yeah, Daniel M. Lavery. Now, if that name rings a bell, he's actually a journalist, and I believe he used to write an agony art column called Prudence, which I had read before, so I did recognise this name when I picked up this book, but as I understand it, this is his first novel. So this was published in 2024, so it's not that old. Now, we don't have this released in the UK as far as I'm aware, so I'd never actually seen this novel before, but I found this in Miami airport as I was coming back from my holiday, so I think that it might only be published in America. Anyway, I thought that the concept of the book sounded really good, so I picked it up and I was quite keen to read it. So this is essentially set in the 1960s, and it's set in New York City, and the location for it is the Biedermeier Hotel. And now the Biedermeier Hotel is apparently, it's not a real hotel, but this is like based on real hotels that were sort of this ilk at the time. But basically the Biedermeier Hotel is a hotel which is sort of run by this lady who's like the matron, I suppose, of the hotel, and in it we have living all these young professional women who, you know, they're not married, they're not cohabiting with any men, which was sort of frowned upon anyway in the 1960s to cohabit before marrying, and they also did not have any friends to share accommodation with in New York City. So you had hotels like this for women who were professional women, or trying to make it as professional women, who didn't have their families to live with in the city, and needed somewhere basically to live so that they could, you know, go and do their jobs, or look for the professional jobs that they were hoping to get. And in these hotels, you know, you often, as I said, had like a sort of matronly figure who, you know, imposed rules such as, you know, this is a curfew that you're meant to be in by, no boys in your rooms, and then they would have also provided things like a breakfast and a dinner in the evening, and sometimes like a cleaning service as well if the ladies like needed their clothes washing, because obviously they didn't have like washing machines in their rooms, you know, and the rooms would have been simple as well, so it was more like sleeping in a hostel really, because they would have shared a bathroom with other people and they wouldn't have had access to their own kitchen, but they could have sort of had maybe some appliances in their rooms. Now, I was really interested in the concept of this. I never really heard of this kind of hotel. I don't know that we had this in the UK, but in America apparently they actually legitimately did exist, although there weren't that many of them, and then they became sort of phased out over the years. So our hotel is set in 1960, but these existed before that, a couple of decades before that, and by the time we get to our hotel in 1960, it's actually sort of becoming to get a bit phased out. So, you know, they stop doing breakfast, or they're sort of saying that we won't be able to afford to do breakfast for the ladies in this book, and that the ladies will have their say about it. But what I enjoyed about it is I thought, you know, you could get some really interesting characters in a place like this. So the majority of the people in the book obviously are women, and they sort of ranging from, you know, like 19, 20 years old, up until, to me, looks like to be about 60 years old. And supposedly women would sort of be transient through these hotels. They might only last about 3 years in these hotels, and then they would go on and probably get married, or, you know, maybe move out of the city and move back in with family. But it was rare that you had people living in them sort of for several decades. However, some people did, and we do have one character in here who has lived in here most of her adult life. And as I say, we've got some really interesting characters. We've got quite a good age range in here, and they are all women. There's one male character who is the guy who's like the doorman for the place, you know, and I really did enjoy the characters that this author had created in this book. I thought that they were all really, really good character studies. And there's quite a lot of characters living in this hotel, and we don't really properly meet all of them. We only meet a handful of them, like maybe 5 or 6. And I think that some of those characters get a little bit more attention than other characters. I don't think that there is, from what I remember from reading this book, I mean, this was literally about a month ago now that I read this, I don't think that there's any one character that the narration is sort of by. It's sort of like in each chapter you're sort of maybe following one of the women and then their thoughts on the other women or a situation that's happening in the hotel. I think where this fell down quite a lot for me was that I thought that there were some very interesting characters, but there was nothing that was really done with them. I think that there could have been a really interesting plot line or story that could have really pulled all of these characters together to do something, and that just never really happened. It just seemed to be one character study after another character study after another character study, but there was nothing in the book to really make the characters sort of grow throughout the whole book, you know. And there was like 1 or 2 events which were quite entertaining, and they were sort of towards the end of the book, but I felt like there should have been more right from the beginning. I felt that we should have had events straight from the beginning, like, you know, several throughout the book that would have brought the characters together, but it was like, you know, character study after character study, oh, let's throw some events in at the end. You know, and that sort of made it more interesting to read at the end when these sort of plot points were put in, like these events. But as I said, then the story was over because there was only sort of 1 or 2 of them. So I felt like the pacing was a bit off, obviously, or maybe not even really there at all, because it wasn't meant to be just a character study, because they wouldn't have put events in at the end of the book. But then again, it's not really a page turner because, as I say, there's nothing really engaging these characters. So I thought that this did not really reach the potential that it could have done. I think that it could have been so much better, and I think that, you know, the writing in this is good. I enjoyed Daniel Lavery's writing style. He's quite verbose, if I'm honest. So, you know, I think that he could have made these characters do something a lot more interesting than what he actually did with them. And, you know, I thought his prose was fairly decent, but he just didn't do anything with it. So, yeah, I felt that was a bit of a letdown. And obviously, as I said, I can't get this in the UK, so I'd spotted it in Miami airport and thought, you know, I'll get that. And books in America cost more than they do in the UK as well. So I have to admit, I am a little bit disappointed that this did not reach the potential that I'd hoped that it would have done. And for that reason, I'm only going to score it a 2.75. Because, yeah, I expected a bit more from it. One thing that I did really, really enjoy in this, though, is there's a lot of description about what the women are wearing. And as this is set in the 1960s, and there's several generations of women, like, you know, age groups of women in this hotel, that I really, really enjoyed, and I thought that was quite interesting. Yeah. So the other book that we're going to talk about is Mrs. March by Virginia Feito. I hope I'm saying that correctly. So this was published in 2021 and is Virginia Feito's debut novel as well. Now, I'd never actually heard of this. I just happened to be browsing on a book website, and I was originally drawn to the front cover because I think that's a really, really nice front cover. But then I started to read the back and I thought, oh, actually, that sounds quite interesting. I'll give that a read. And it's not too big. It's like only about 300 pages as well, maybe just under, I think. Let me just check before I say that. Yeah, it's just under 300 pages, so it's not like a massive amount to read, and it's a thriller, basically. So this is also set in New York City. I was never really sure of what time this book was set in. Doesn't really say, but our main character, Mrs. March, she always dresses in a way that's kind of like very classic, like 60s dress. Maybe 70s from the way that it's described. So I don't know if it is set back in that time or if she is just a person in this time dressing like that, because it's quite popular to dress like that again now. So yeah, I'm a little bit unsure about that. But anyway, Mrs. March is, she almost reminds me of the character Bree Vanderkamp from Desperate Housewives, if anybody remembers watching that. She is really prim and she's proper, and she wants like, outward appearances are really, really important to her, and she wants everybody that's around her to think that she's doing well, that she's got her life together, that her family's got their life together. And she lives in this flat in New York with her husband and her son, who is about 8 to 10 years old. However, her son's not really there for a lot of the book, like he's sort of away on a school trip. Anyway, her husband writes novels, and she, you know, they've been married for over a decade now, and she doesn't really read his work anymore. Like, she doesn't really seem to have much interest in it. But I've got to be honest, as we go through the novel, she doesn't really have any interest in her husband at all. She doesn't really seem to have any affection for him. She doesn't really like to see, you know, to have him touch her, or she doesn't really seem to have, you know, much of a conversation with him that's got any substance, you know, other than what do you want for dinner sort of thing. So yeah, he has just published a novel, and this novel is like hit the bestsellers list, and he's doing really, really well, and everybody's talking about it, but she's never read it. And all she knows about it is that it's about a prostitute, essentially, and Mrs. March, like, a prostitute does not agree with Mrs. March's morals or ethics in life. Anyway, Mrs. March sort of goes into a bakery at the beginning of the book, and the lady who serves her in the bakery says, "Oh, I absolutely love your husband's book. Don't you think that it's funny he set the character on you, like set the main character to be sort of based on you?" And Mrs. March is like, well, you know, uses some language that I probably won't repeat to describe, you know, this main character, and said that, you know, it's nothing like me. And, you know, the lady in the bakery was like, "Oh, sorry, my apologies." Anyway, this sticks in Mrs. March's mind, and she goes home and she's appalled to think that she may have, you know, he may have based a character who is, you know, a prostitute based on her. And she's like, why would he do this? So, you know, she starts to ransack his office to, you know, find the book. And again, she doesn't actually really read the book from front to back, as far as I can tell. But, you know, she's sort of looking for hints in the start of the book and in the dedication, and, you know, she's sort of thinking, you know, has he really done this? Has this person been mistaken? And this, you know, takes over her entire life. And this book is a page turner, because all of this stuff sort of happens on the first page. Like, what I'm telling you here is not a spoiler, because it's kind of written on the back of the book anyway. But this really gets into her head, that she thinks that her husband thinks that she is like the prostitute that he set his book on. And she just starts to descend into madness. Like, you know, she completely starts to lose touch with reality over the course of what I think is a week or so, to be honest, in this book. And her behaviour becomes more and more and more and more erratic. However, she's not really in public that much, so the only person who really witnesses her behaviour changing is the housekeeper, I think. But yeah, if you want to read a book about somebody descending into absolute madness, this book does this really, really, really well. But there are aspects of Mrs. March's character that I found really entertaining as well. So as I said, like, she likes to think that she's doing better than everybody else, and if she's not doing better, she wants people to think that she's doing better. She does not want there to be a crack for the outside world to see with her or her family. So there's this quote in the book that I just really, really enjoyed, and essentially Mrs. March goes to pick up her son off I think they're the upstairs neighbours, Sheila and Bob, because they have a son that's roughly the same age as her son, so sometimes her son goes there after school. So she goes round to pick him up, and the neighbours have recently, or had been on a holiday somewhere, and Mrs. March just made a comment, which was, you know, about, did their child enjoy it? And they'd said, oh, no, we wanted to go on holiday together. We left the child with, I think, you know, grandparents or something, so that we could enjoy some time away together. And the quote is, "Oh," said Mrs. March, annoyed that living together apparently wasn't enough for Sheila and Bob. They had to take romantic trips around the world, even though they'd been married for at least 10 years. How nice. And it just really annoyed me because she is actually quite bitchy, I think, like when it comes to what other people have if she doesn't have it. And clearly she's in an unhappy marriage, and her and her husband probably wouldn't go for a romantic holiday together. So yeah, she's sort of quite bitchy in the way that she sort of talks about other people as well, and I found that really entertaining throughout the book. And I say, as this character is descending into madness, there's not really any sort of diagnosis given to her by the end of the book, if I'm honest. So it's sort of left open for interpretation, I think, by the reader. On the whole, I enjoyed the ending. I thought that it was good, and I think, yeah, I think I would give this a 4-star. You know, I mean, it wasn't quite at a 5-star level for me, because I just think maybe there are a couple of questions that I'd have liked to have been answered that were not answered by this book. But I really enjoyed the way that the suspense was generated throughout the book, and I think that, you know, the things that were slowly happening to the character, like building one after the other, which kind of showed her, you know, going into this sort of madness. I thought it was all done really, really, really well. And I really liked the way that the other characters were written into Mrs. March's life. So I think that this was a really, really good debut novel by Virginia Feito. I believe she's got a new one that came out last year called Victorian Psycho. So I definitely wouldn't be adverse to reading that if it's anything like this one. So definitely recommend if you like thrillers that are sort of you know, there's no blood and gore in here as such. It's like a character study, but it's like a thriller about a character who's sort of, as I say, descending into madness. But very, very well done. Really enjoyed this. Now, I forgot to say when I started reviewing this book, when I'd actually read this book. So I read this book before I even actually went on holiday, but it was the first book I read after I'd done reviews. So it fell into the holiday reviews. So I actually did take quite a few notes on this at the time, knowing it would be quite a long time since I would review it. But I just really, really enjoyed it, and I definitely would read this again. Really good, really good. So that's now all of the books that I read in Miscellaneous March reviewed. So hopefully you've listened to some of those reviews and you may have found something to read that you'd not really heard of before, or didn't know whether or not that you wanted to read. So if you've enjoyed watching these videos, please press the thumbs up button, and if you'd like to see my future content, please press the subscribe button. Now, what I will do probably next week is I will do a final roundup video of all of the books that I read in March, as I usually do, and then rate them all so you can see which one I actually enjoyed the most out of the whole month and which one I enjoyed the least. But I said I will publish that probably next Thursday or next Friday. And then obviously on Mondays at the moment I'm in the middle of award-winning April, so I'm only reading award-winning books in April. So we had reviews for those books on Monday, and we will have another one on the coming Monday. Thanks for watching this video, and I hope to see you soon. Bye!